A reason and purpose for everything. Part 4. The greatest scientist of the 20th century, Albert Einstein, said the following, quote, in response to a young girl who had asked him whether he believed in God, he wrote, "Everyone who is seriously involved in the pursuit of science becomes convinced that a spirit is manifest in the laws of the universe, a spirit vastly superior to that of man." End quote. Other scientists, physicists, etc., are not so forthcoming with their views, choosing rather to allow their voices to be stifled by the politicisation of science and their own prejudices. Despite most people's opinions of scientists, that they are unbiased, purely objective thinkers who are beyond the influence of, even immune to prevarication, and to favouring only that which proves them right, and that they are always honest, objective thinkers who only allow themselves to be guided by provable facts, many allow their world views to influence their science. Quote, a rather unhealthy interaction occurs when science is misused to argue for a particular worldview. For example, atheists, both scientists and non-scientists, have a long history of loudly claiming that the results of science prove that atheism is true. When atheists make such claims in their writings and speaking, they are seldom careful to differentiate where the science ends and their worldview claims begin. They tend to thoroughly mix scientific results with their worldview claims, so that it is difficult for a non-scientist to tell the difference. This type of writing and speaking has caused the entire scientific community to acquire an atheistic reputation, even though only a few scientists mix atheism with science in this way. Everything in life has a cause behind it. End quote. Everything in life has a cause behind it, and yet many still irrationally prefer to believe that things happen by chance, for no reason or purpose at all, even the creation of the world, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Man has a tendency to believe what he wants to believe, and never challenging what he believes, rather than properly investigating and studying the relevant subject matter so as to make sure he is not believing that which is simply not true and therefore not real. There is no such thing as an accident. That is, an occurrence which was not the result of decisions and consequences in an ordered and orderly world. Napoleon Bonaparte once stated, quote, "There is no such thing as an accident. It is fate misnamed." End quote. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, also said the same thing. But what of fate, Messrs. Bonaparte and Freud? Is there no cause, no guiding hand behind fate? If not, then one would have to say that fate is merely an accident too. If things are merely accidents, then there are no leading causes, and so accidents become things which happen not as consequences, but by sheer random chance or coincidence. Simply because something was unintended, unforeseen, or unplanned does not mean that it is not a consequence. Consequences will occur no matter what our intentions are. How many people have been killed at the hands of those whose intention was to cause no one any harm? Occasionally, accidents we are involved in are the result of someone else's decision. The motorcyclist who loses control on some gravel carelessly left on a road after roadworks may not have done anything particularly wrong. However, his decision to travel down that road, coupled with the road worker's carelessness or conscious decision to not bother sweeping that gravel off the road, was certainly a contributing factor which led to the inevitable so-called accident. Accidents are always caused by someone who did or did not do something. Accidents don't just happen, they are caused. Accidents are always the result of action, or the action of non-action. Accidents are not intended by those involved, but they are always the result of some action and or non-action on their part or that of others. Accidents are always caused by someone, and if there is cause, then there must be fault. Cause, which always produces consequence, reveals the one who is at fault. If there is an effect, then there must be a cause, and there is always a cause behind the cause. Nothing which exists is without cause, therefore there must be a cause behind every cause, otherwise how would a cause ever have come into existence? Whether it's the mind of God who created the wind that disperses a plant's seeds, to hurricanes which destroy properties and lives, to a toddler whose decision to play with matches caused the house to burn down. Everything has a precedent cause and is therefore an effect. If two cars have collided, there is a cause and therefore a reason why they have collided. Two cars colliding is no coincidence. An accident is an effect. Though accidents are unintended, the results are always inevitable. If one could trace all the events which lead up to a particular accident, one would not be at all surprised at the consequential result of those events, decisions, etc. Despite what appearances might suggest, the drivers of the two cars which have collided cannot be said to have been at the precise moment and point of collision purely by chance, for their being at that particular geographic location was the evidential result or effect of whatever decisions they made or did not make prior to the collision, i.e., accelerating faster, driving slower, stopping at a red light, or driving through an amber light, etc. Even events which occurred days, weeks, months, or even longer prior to the collision are contributing factors. What if they decided not to go out that day at a particular time? For every action there is reaction. For every action or non-action there must be a cause, a decision, and therefore a reason. There is no room for coincidence in an orderly universe. Coincidence simply cannot exist in an ordered consequential universe. These are the basic rules of order. The fact that such a law exists within the universe shows that such a law exists for the universe. If there is a cause, then obviously there must be a reason, and therefore meaning behind the cause. However, to stop at there is a cause behind the effect, and proceed no further, is to deny that there was a cause behind the cause which caused the effect to occur. Quote, "Science demonstrates that the universe is ordered. E equals mc squared is a formula that is both simple yet complex. If the universe is chaotic, then this formula would be meaningless. Scientists make discoveries about the universe because it is ordered. Are we simply lucky to have an ordered universe? Or is it more logical that the universe is ordered due to intelligent design? Does order in a room come by random chance, or does it come by effort and intelligence? The order of the universe is not an assumption, it is an observed fact. The simplest definition of science is the search for rules." End quote. No such search could be successfully conducted in a chaotic, unplanned and disordered universe. There cannot be order without rules, and if there are rules, there must essentially be a rule maker. Rules do not come out of thin air. They are no accident. Rules are made and put into place by mind. Reason and purpose equal order and design. There cannot be scientific rules, absolute, established, reliable laws and order in the universe without there also being a rule maker. The only alternative would be rules and order coming out of chaos. Therefore chaos would ironically and illogically be the father, overseer or CEO of all order. This is nothing less than the logic of madness. Why are there rules, design, order, laws of physics, etc.? Where did the design, order, rules, laws of physics, etc. come from? Did they form themselves out of nothing? How can there be structure without design? Are we to blindly accept the rather infantile doctrine that things have developed and evolved over billions of years? Many have been conditioned to unreservedly accept the phrase billions of years as the panacea, the solution or remedy that must be unquestionably submitted to for all things unexplainable. Are coincidence and billions of years the answer to everything? The dictatorial Orwellian explanations which we must all blindly accept? Coincidence and billions of years are merely explanations which, dare I say it, the real primitive man has concocted for the things he cannot see, does not comprehend, and therefore rejects as probable, let alone possible. The renowned physicist and reputed smartest man on earth, Stephen Hawking, in his book The Grand Design, says, quote, "Because there is a law such as gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. Spontaneous creation is the reason there is something rather than nothing, why the universe exists, why we exist." End quote. Quote, "This type of reasoning of spontaneous creation is unorthodox because physical science has always postulated that gravity requires matter. This quote of creation because of gravity is reverse thinking. Gravity requires matter, which requires the creation of matter. In other words, if no creator or creation, then no matter. If no matter, then no gravity." End quote. The idea of gravity as proof that the universe has created itself out of nothing is nothing short of sheer lunacy. It may sound all well and good to those willing, or should I say naive enough to believe it, but what Hawking does not explain is why spontaneous creation. If he cannot explain how spontaneous creation occurred, then he should never have made such an asinine statement. If he cannot explain how, then it is obvious he cannot and never will be able to explain why. For the why is always the cause of the how. The deficiency in Hawking's theory is seen in his failure to address the question, where did gravity come from? Moreover, how did it get here? Why is it here? Has it always been? If so, where is the evidence? Is gravity the only thing which has no source? Where does his so-called spontaneous creation come from? What is its underlying cause? Nothing? I mean, how silly do these people think mankind is to offer it some ludicrous explanation which explains nothing and promotes nothing as the mother of us all, and expected to be accepted as truth whilst offering absolutely no evidence? Are the parents which spawn the universe chaos and nothing? Moreover, is spontaneity somehow supposed to imply the absence of origin, the non-essentiality of origin? If it is a thing, then it too must have a source, a beginning. If it has an effect, then it must have a cause. But where did this cause get its DNA to bring about the precise effect or consequence of its being? And how does it all fit perfectly together with everything else? Something may well seem to have appeared out of nothing, but everything has its source, and therefore reason and purpose. Another has commented, quote, "I thought that gravity was a function of mass, as per Einstein. How can you have gravity before mass, and therefore how can gravity explain mass?" Whether you believe in God or not, you have to agree that there has to be an origin, a starting point or cause for everything in this world. If you say it is the Big Bang, then you are saying that matter was the first thing. Okay, let me ask you, where did matter come from? For something can't just spring out of nothing. And we all know that matter wears out. It is not eternal. So that first cause has to be eternal, uncreated. It has to be God, a being, the supreme being. He created all that is. End quote. God is the only source which has no origin and can create something out of nothing. God himself is beyond spontaneity, for he is the eternal being. To say that something can create itself out of nothing is to say that it existed before it came into being. That everything came from nothing is to say that nothing is the creator of all, or that all creates itself from nothing. To say that something can create itself out of nothing is to say that nothing is the origin of everything. Those who deny the truth that God is the creator ask that we accept that nothing is the creator. We are asked to believe that somehow something knew what it wanted to be and therefore had the power to be before it ever was. If anything could come into being independently of everything else, it would first need to exist. How could anything come into being of itself without there being a mind and will? How could nothing initiate the process of anything when it does not even have any, quote, objective reality or being, unquote? How could nothing bring anything into being when it cannot even cause itself to exist? How can a 2-day-old baby be expected to make a calculator when it has no idea what mathematics is? Where did nothing ever get the ability to do anything? There is nothing which has the power to create itself. Every living being can produce something, but nothing cannot even produce nothing. For how can nothing do anything? Nothing cannot even fail to do something. It cannot even attempt to do anything because it simply does not exist. Even spontaneity cannot come from nothing. Spontaneity cannot exist without that which causes it to be. If there is something that causes spontaneity, then it too must be something. For how can nothing which For how can nothing which is not do anything to be or bring anything else into being? How could nothing do anything? Nothing is far below zero. Nothing is far less than a negative number, for it does not even exist. You can look at a thermometer and see 0 degrees or even -3 degrees, but there is never such a thing as no degree of hot or cold. Even 0 degrees is a degree, but no degree whatsoever is impossible. If there were such a thing as no degrees at all, then there would be no weather at all. 0 degrees is a measurement of weather. No degrees is an absurdity. If you cannot subtract anything from something, then there is nothing there at all. If 0 was not a subtractable number, then there would be no such thing as a negative number. That which cannot be subtracted from evidences its non-existence. Nothing has no positive value or negative value. It cannot be valued at all, which is proof positive that it does not even exist. To even call that which does not exist nothing is like trying to describe an odour which you cannot smell. If the village idiot claimed that everything came from nothing, no one would give his claim a second thought, for it would be instantly recognizable as foolishness. But for some strange reason, if a scientist makes the same claim, somehow it is thoughtfully considered and even actually believed. Nothing is void of everything. Nothing has no character, nothing which can define it except its nothingness. To say that everything comes from nothing is to say that everything has no origin, that everything just began to be, that it did not take an almighty creator God to make it, but that all of creation just needed nothing to bring it into existence. That which did not exist brought everything into existence. Utter madness. Those who do not see or believe the truth are left with no other alternative but to hold to that which is error. There must be something before there can be spontaneity. There is nothing which can do anything before its own existence. Nothing can do nothing. It never has, and it never will. If nothing comes from nothing, then how, pray tell, can something come from nothing? Have you ever tried to make something out of nothing? Some scientists are today saying that the cosmos came into being from nothing at all. Quote, "It had to happen," they say, "because nothing is inherently unstable." End quote. How can something which does not exist be unstable, or be in any kind of condition for that matter, other than non-existence? That which cannot be affected can affect nothing. How can nothing even be brought into a conversation which concerns something, much less the origin of anything? And if nothing could be in any condition other than its own nothingness, how could anyone ever figure out what that condition was, for surely nothing is undetectable? How can nothing be anything but nothing? No one can see, touch, smell, hear, or taste nothing, so how can anyone pass any judgment upon it, or claim that anything comes from it? What can possibly come from nothing? What can be poured out of an empty box? How can nothing have any character outside of its non-existence? How can nothing have any kind of identifying element except for its nothingness? Quote, Quantum mechanics tells us that there is no such thing as empty space. Even the most perfect vacuum is actually filled by a roiling cloud of particles and antiparticles, which flare into existence and almost instantaneously fade back into nothingness. These so-called virtual particles don't last long enough to be observed directly, but we know they exist by their effects." End quote. But where did particles, antiparticles and virtual particles come from? If spontaneity came from these antiparticles, what causes them to flare into existence? Can quantum mechanics prove that there ever was an empty space from which things just simply appeared of their own accord? Just because these antiparticles and virtual particles exist, just because they exist now, does not mean they have always been, much less that they materialize themselves out of nothing, that is, without a precedent cause behind them. A science which insists there is no God has never and can never get to the bottom of the origin of the universe, because the universe has a cause, and therefore its cause must have an origin. All scientists can offer us is that something has always been, even if it was nothing, or that everything has come from nothing. In fact, the theories of quantum equation and general relativity say that the universe has no beginning. According to its godless thinking, science has no other so-called answer, hence its ridiculous statements which it expects the world to believe simply because it cannot arrive at, or perhaps will not accept, the truth. Quote, "Let's say you have a large room. It's fully enclosed and is about the size of a football field. The room has no doors or windows and no holes in its walls. Inside the room there is nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not a particle of anything, no air at all, no dust at all, no light at all. It's a sealed room that is pitch black inside. Then what happens?" End quote. Nothing. What could conceivably happen? The interaction between nothing and nothing would produce nothing. Nothing cannot even produce nothing. So how, the question begs to be asked, can nothing be expected to produce something? You can stretch and strain your imagination to breaking point, and still all you would have is nothing. If nothing could ever happen in such a room, how in the world could it have ever happened on such a grand scale as the endless universe? Nothing from nothing leaves nothing. Nothing plus nothing makes nothing. Nothing is no thing. Quote, "Analytic philosophers say nothing is a noun. It seems like a name for an entity, but it's not. It just means not anything." End quote. One interpretation of nothing is that it is made up of nanoparticles, things which cannot be seen. However, if this so-called nothing contains something, if it consists of something, then it can no longer rightly be called nothing. How can one describe nothing by referring to something? If nothing contains something, then how can that nothing be no thing? The smallest particle in the universe is called a quark, which exists inside an atom. But no matter how small the particle, it can never properly be labelled as nothing. If it has size and substance, it is something. Nothing has no size and no substance. If it did, it would be something. Imagine if the smallest thing in the universe was a thimble. How idiotic would it be to call that thimble nothing? Simply because something is microscopic in size does not in any way justify its being referred to as nothing. If one can point at something, then it cannot be nothing. Others argue, but what if nothing does not exist? What if what we believe to be nothing actually contains something, or even many things, which we cannot yet discern or comprehend? End quote. To entertain the hypothetical or illogical by imagining all sorts of things which have no proof, to live a life which gives credence and substance to potentialities which exist only in one's thoughts and imagination, is to be a candidate for a straitjacket. If nothing was made up of anything, it would not be nothing, but something. Some scientists believe that there is no such thing as nothing. Quote, "In our universe, even a dark, empty void of space, absent of all particles, is still something." End quote. However, nothing is truly indescribable. Anytime you try to describe nothing, you have to picture something. Even if you picture nothing but black, you are picturing something. And something is that which nothing has never been or will be. Nothing is not an entity. It is nothing. To picture nothing would be like trying to picture death. One can picture a dead body, however, one cannot picture death. What does death look like? What does nothing look like? In all spheres of life, we must always deal with reality, and not try to defend the indefensible by attempting to support unproven ideas with conjecture, imagination, and speculation. Still, there are many people who consider themselves as highly advanced creatures because they can see the potentiality of potential, and can speculate for hours over mere potentialities rather than deal with absolute facts. Science claims one of two things. Either the universe came from nothing, or that an unexplainable occurrence such as the Big Bang is the source of all things. Others, called theistic evolutionists, try to merge creation with the Big Bang theory, saying God started everything by a Big Bang, and then allowed this alleged phenomenon to take care of all the creating via evolution. That everything originated from nothing is still the popular theory among scientists who miserably fail to explain the origin of this amazing thing called nothing, from which everything finds its origin. Imagine actually believing the madness that all which exists finds its origin in all that does not exist. Have you ever tried to make something from that which does not exist? How would you even begin to even think of how you could attempt such a feat? How could one ever locate that which does not exist in order to make something else which does not exist? How could one ever locate that which does not exist in order to make something else which does not exist into something which does exist? Did all this order we see around us come from meaningless disorder, which just spontaneously, conveniently appeared out of nothing, with no source, and for no reason, and yet with a purpose? Yes? Well then, where did the disorder come from? What is its origin? If order came from nothing, or from chaos, then where did disorder come from? Every established law has an origin and a reason. You cannot have things proceeding from scientific law and yet scientific law proceeding from nothing. There are many convenient truths which people refuse to relinquish despite copious amounts of evidence which contradicts those convenient so-called truths. Winston Churchill once commented, "Men occasionally stumble over the truth, but most of them pick themselves up and hurry off as if nothing had happened." Order cannot come from chaos. Otherwise, even chaos would have a pattern of some sort, an order to it, and would therefore not be chaos. Chaos would not be chaos if there was any order to it. If there was some order, some pattern to chaos, you would not only have to call it something else, it would be something else. Quote, "Hurricanes do not build cities, floods do not plant fields, earthquakes do not make paved roads." End quote. Random chaos does not produce order. Quote, "The universe necessarily has consistent, reliable order. If everything were random, there would be no regularity or structure whatsoever, and no universe or universal laws as such. In fact, the universe could be defined as order. This is why the Greeks called it cosmos, which means order and world, because the ancient Greeks, from whom Western civilization comes, believed that the world was perfectly harmonious and impeccably put in order. In physics, nothing physical could exist prior to the beginning point. Indeed, there is no prior to the beginning point because there is no physical time. Secondly, if the physical universe and its physical time did not exist prior to the beginning, then it was literally nothing. It is important to note that nothing means nothing. It does not mean a vacuum or a low energy state of a quantum field, empty space, or other real things. Vacuums, empty space, and low energy states in quantum fields are dimensional and orientable. They have specific characteristics and parameters, but nothing is not dimensional or orientable, and it does not have any specific characteristics or parameters because it is nothing. For example, you can have more or less of a vacuum or empty space, but you cannot have more or less of nothing, because nothing is nothing. Thirdly, nothing can do only nothing, because it is nothing. To imply the contrary is to make nothing into something. The classical expression is right. From nothing, only nothing comes. Fourthly, if nothing can't do anything, then it certainly cannot create anything. Thus, when the universe was nothing, it could not have created itself, made itself into something, when it was nothing. Because when it was nothing, it could only do nothing. Finally, if the universe could not have made itself into something when it was nothing, then something else would have had to have made the universe into something when it was nothing, and that something else would have to be completely transcendent, completely independent of the universe and beyond it. This transcendent and independent creative force beyond our universe and its space-time asymmetry is generally termed a creator. Therefore, a beginning in physics implies a transcendent, powerful creative force, i.e., a creator. End quote. This is one reason why scientists love the everything came from nothing theory, because nothing has no origin and therefore no source. So rather than believe in a creator God, science prefers to turn to nothing as the maker of all things. Yes, folks, can you believe that there are real people out there who believe that nothing is the creator of everything? Can you believe the insanity of refusing to believe in a creator God, but embracing the lie that nothing whatsoever is the creator? Every erroneous answer to an equation makes sense to someone, especially if it is supported by a wrong method of calculation. Miscalculation can only ever lead to erroneous answers, but if that flawed process is all that a person knows, is all a person can see or wants to see, they will only ever see the answers their misjudgment provides as nothing but true and correct. Worse still, they will only ever see the truth as error as long as they hold to their flawed methods of calculation. What everyone who holds to a wrong answer has in common is the fact that none of them have or will ever have the right answer, because none of them have used the right and proper method of calculation. It is important to note that a flawed method of calculation is not one which differs from the standard method, but one which leads to error. If you have a room filled with 100 4-year-old children, and you ask them the question, how much is 7.25 multiplied by 8 to the power of 12 minus 14 plus 18.7 divided by 3, how many different answers do you think you're going to get? 100, right? You will not get one right answer because the children do not know how to reach the only right answer, because they do not know, have never been taught, or are ignoring the proper method of calculation. You get 100 wrong answers because the children simply do not know the truth. They will all arrive at a wrong answer because they have all travelled the wrong road of improper method. But does all this mean there is no right answer? Do the miscalculations and improper mathematical methods of the ignorant, which only lead to incorrect answers, offer one iota of proof that no one can ever arrive at the only correct answer? Or that there is no correct answer? Of course not. If a proper, provable method is adopted, one will always and only arrive at the correct answer. If one has a clear view of all the facts and the knowledge of how to correctly decipher them, one will always arrive at the truth. As long as a person uses the correct method of calculation, one will not only know what the correct answer is, but also why it is the correct answer, and why every other answer is evidence of an erroneous method of calculation. Ignorance obscures one's view of that which is real, of that which is truth, and leaves one with only an imagined reality, an imagined truth. People have different answers because they are looking at different pictures, or only part of the same picture, because they are in possession of conflicting information as well as diametrically opposing methods of processing that information. The insane makes logical sense to those whose knowledge is not only limited, but also flawed. The insane, or those who are just plain wrong, share a common trait. They do not believe what they believe because they believe it to be wrong, but because they are convinced it is right. Just about any answer has the potential to make sense to one who does not understand the subject matter. One cannot arrive at the correct answer by using a faulty calculator, or by feeding a perfectly functioning calculator the wrong information. To illustrate this point, I present the listener with the following analogy. The old vaudeville comedians Abbott and Costello came up with a comic routine that explains all this perfectly. Costello claimed that 13 multiplied by 7 equals 28. Of this he was certain, sincerely and vehemently convinced. In an effort to prove his claim correct, he proceeded to write the number 13 on a blackboard, and directly under the 3 wrote the number 7. So far, so good. Then he proceeded to multiply the 3 by 7, which equaled 21, and promptly wrote that number down. Subsequent to this, Costello multiplied the 1 from the number 13 by 7, which makes 7. He then wrote the number 7 directly under the 21. Adding the two numbers, 21 and 7, his solution was 7 multiplied by 13 equals 28. Far from convinced, his partner Abbott, in an attempt to prove his buddy wrong and arrive at the correct answer, told Costello to write down the number 13 7 times. After doing this, Abbott began adding the column of 3s together. 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21. After which Costello quickly joined in, finishing off the count by adding the 1s to the 21. 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. Having proven his calculation correct to his own satisfaction, Costello confidently walked away with not just one, but 2 ways he can prove that 7 multiplied by 13 equals 28. For Costello, these 2 witnesses assured him he was incontestably correct in his calculations. This is precisely the same way Satan confuses man and leads him astray in matters spiritual. Change the proper method of arriving at truth. Feed on the wrong information and or wrongly interpreted information, and you will arrive at anything but the truth. Abbott not only knew the truth, but in the light which only truth can provide, he was also able to see, know and understand why Costello could not possibly be right. Costello, on the other hand, was simply blinded by error, believing it to be truth. Truth will always expose error, but error can only ever reveal itself. Preclude the truth, and error will make sense. Nonsense makes perfect sense to those who have no sense of what the truth is. Order is all around us. There is order in the universe, there is order in nature, order in our lives, and even in our own bodies. Quote, "Every organic body expresses the law of order." Until something goes wrong, we often don't think about the incredible way all the systems and organs of our bodies work together flawlessly. Nerves and muscles, bones and tissues, our heart and brain and lungs, eyes and ears, all these things and hundreds more are seamlessly connected into a functioning, healthy human person. Thousands of years ago, the psalmist pondered the intricate way his body was put together and exclaimed to God, "I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvellous are thy works." Psalm 139 verse 14. End quote. Every day, scientists are discovering that the wide variety of heavenly bodies has a purpose, that there is a reason for the existence of everything in the universe, and that nothing exists because of any randomness or by some form of nonsensical, meaningless chance. Everything that exists has an origin, and therefore a source. If an origin, there must also be a reason. And if a reason, there must be a purpose for and a cause behind everything, including the origin of the universe and therefore everything in it. Chaos can come from order, but order cannot come from chaos. One can put the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle which has fallen onto the floor together again, order from chaos, but one cannot logically expect to wildly toss the finished puzzle into the air and have all the pieces land perfectly into position, order from chaos. Chaos can come from order, but no order can be produced by chaos. As Leonardo da Vinci once said, everything, quote, "everything connects to everything else," end quote. Everything leads to something else. If everything connects to everything else, then surely there must be an ultimate single source, one who is behind the connecting, otherwise there would be no orderly pattern to life, no sense or real meaning to the connections. Darwin identified this single source, wrongly labelling it by his preferred phrase, quote, descent with modification, end quote. While not using the term evolution, Darwin did use the term evolve, quote, though only once in his book The Origin of Species, 1859. Darwin's general theory presumes the development of life from non-life and stresses a purely naturalistic or undirected descent with modification. That is, complex creatures evolve from more simplistic ancestors naturally over time. In a nutshell, as random genetic mutations occur within an organism's genetic code, the beneficial mutations are preserved because they aid survival, a process known as natural selection. End quote. The mad theory that one creature evolves into another is torn to shreds by the fact that everything produces after its own kind. Monkeys do not produce human beings, but only monkeys. Likewise, humans do not produce llamas, but only other humans. If there is connection, there is continuation. If there is connection, there is continuation. A constant and consistent theme running through everything and everyone. It's called the will and creative power of God. Everything in the universe points to and leads to a creator God. Many people have no problem with this. Most do believe in a higher being or higher power. The overwhelming failure of mankind, however, which highlights its sinful nature, is the fact that most do not know who exactly that higher being or higher power is, or how to determine which is the only true God. It is estimated that 86% of the world's population is religious. Around 89% of Americans believe in the existence of God. Quote, approximately 90 million Americans believe aliens exist, and around 12 million people in the US believe that interstellar lizards in people suits rule their country. End quote. In a world in which the masses have an intimate relationship with just about anything that is not true, many believe that aliens, whose existence has never been proven, aliens from other planets do not merely exist, but are in control of planet Earth, plotting and watching our every move. Other conspiracy theorists believe that some government's intelligence agency has the power to manipulate our thoughts and actions, etc. That satellites in space are reading our minds this very minute, and possibly even directing our steps. Quote, some of the world's richest and most powerful people are convinced that we are living in a computer simulation. Philosophers have long been concerned about how we can know that our world isn't just a very believable simulation of a real one. Many people in Silicon Valley have become obsessed with the simulation hypothesis, the argument that what we experience as reality is in fact fabricated in a computer. End quote. One gentleman has commented, quote, computing technology has advanced so quickly that at some point in the future it will become indistinguishable from real life. And if it does, there's no reason to think that it hasn't done already, and that that's what we are currently living through. End quote. The madness of man is made manifestly visible in his attempts to complicate reality, to interfere with reality, to ask inane questions about the unquestionable, because of his inability or unwillingness to accept reality as it really is. Add to this the worldwide use of drugs, perhaps the most potent of which is technology, and you have a unique creature which not only questions reality, but seeks to eagerly replace it with that which is unreal. A forerunner to this nonsense was Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi, circa 369 BC to 286 BC, who is quoted as saying, quote, "Once upon a time I dreamt I was a butterfly, fluttering hither and thither, to all intents and purposes a butterfly. I was conscious only of my happiness as a butterfly, unaware that I was myself. Soon I awaked, and there I was, veritably myself again. Now I do not know whether I was then a man dreaming I was a butterfly, or whether I am now a butterfly dreaming I am a man." End quote. Anyone who seriously ponders over such a ludicrous question may as well believe that real butterflies often wonder if they are really people who are only dreaming they are butterflies. Seeking an alternative reality is as foolish an endeavour as seeking a safer seat on a sinking ship, or seeking an alternative to truth. In this sin-cursed world, even many animals seek the effects of drugs to alter their reality. Quote, "Cats using catnip, dolphins squeezing pufferfish in the hope of the fish releasing a small burst of neurotoxin and passing it to other dolphins. Cows grazing on loco weed, an intoxicating plant which acts as a tranquilizer. Bighorn sheep scraping hallucinogenic lichen to which they often become addicted. Deer, including moose and caribou, seeking out psychedelic mushrooms, and so on." End quote. When one does not know the truth or will not accept reality, one is constantly assailed by that which might be truth, which might be real, even the ridiculous. The same is true for drug takers. One can be just as addicted to unreality as one can be to illicit or even prescribed drugs. When one does not know the truth or even how to correctly calculate truth, even the mad thoughts of obsessed individuals cannot be discounted as being potentially true. Without truth, no thought can be discounted, no philosophy or outlook on life, no matter how preposterous it may be, can legitimately be discounted. All must be considered as potentially true until proven untrue. This, my friend, is literally the stuff of madness. Despite the ravings of people who have perhaps seen one too many science fiction movies, or who worship at the feet of rebellion for rebellion's sake, and simply refuse to believe any truths which the preceding generation believed, the universe does have one who is in control. A designer and planner of inestimable wisdom and power, who is unmistakably known by those whom he has revealed himself to. Quote, "According to a survey by World Religions, Religion Statistics, Geography, Church Statistics, people who are secular, non-religious agnostics and atheists account for about 14% of the world's population. 14% of 7 billion people is 980 million people. Therefore, the actual numerical figure of people who believe in the existence of God is approximately 6 billion and 20 million people." End quote. Though 86% of the world's population believe in the existence of God, the problem which most of them face is that though there obviously is a God, they do not have the faintest idea as to who this higher power is, or how to know for certain who the true God is. For many, their belief in God is a superstitious one. They are bound by tradition, cultural and familial, rather than the truth. A truthless tradition is nothing but a curse. There is absolutely no merit in upholding a tradition which does not find its origin in God's truth. Quote, "Human tradition is fallible. Divine revelation is the ultimate authority, not the human tradition that has developed around it." When we look at what the Bible actually says, including Jesus' rebuke of the traditionalists of his day, see Luke 11:37 through 52, and also Mark 7 verse 13, it is clear that the Bible is to be our authority. This is not to say that tradition is without merit, but that tradition is only authoritative insofar as it is correctly based on biblical truth. Traditions, no matter how ancient they may be, only have value if they are properly grounded in God's truth and point us to Him. Tradition must be under the authority of God and His Word. Any tradition that contradicts God's Word or distracts us from it should be discarded." End quote. They do not recognize... end quote. "Many have no regard for the truth, for they have no intimate relationship with its author. They do not recognize truth as truth, nor the true God as God. Their relationship is with what they have been told the truth is, and who they have been told God is. Religionists the world over have a relationship with whom they believe the true God to be, with what they believe the truth to be, but not with who the true God or what His truth actually is. For the time will come, Scripture says, when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lusts shall they heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables." 2 Timothy 4 verses 3 and 4. Man has mistakenly interpreted and subsequently confused his traditions, sincerity and familiarity with what he believes the truth to be, and the way it makes him feel, as unassailable confirmation that it is truth. Man has believed God to be just about anything, from various animals to aspects of nature, and even celestial bodies such as the sun and moon. Once we cast aside the ridiculous, all we are left with is a Creator God who sovereignly rules over all. Despite the fact that many acknowledge the existence of a Creator, the confusion as to exactly who the Creator is and why we are all here is in no way diminished, because people believe so many different and contrasting things about God, and consequently who exactly the true God is, what He has done, as well as how and whom He saves. Many who claim to believe in the God of the Bible have contrasting and erroneous beliefs about Him. What conclusion would you reach if you were to walk into a room filled with 1,000 people, all having a different answer to a particular equation? Would you conclude that none of them had the right answer? Or would you go beyond the obvious, immediate thought concerning the mass of confusing and contradictory answers and think that perhaps one of the people might just be right? If they all have different answers, then there is no other logical, rational conclusion that can be reached other than all are wrong, or one of these 1,000 people does have the correct answer. They cannot all be right, for their answers are all different. The only way to have the truth, to discern the truth, is to know the truth. Vast numbers of people hold to beliefs and traditions which are very personal to them concerning God. Secret truths which they are convinced are true, but do not share with anyone. They either have no biblical precedent for what they believe, or have misconstrued and misunderstood what the Word of God is saying. If ever there was a sign of a man's accursed state, it is his incorrect understanding of who God is, what God has done, and for whom he has done it. Sincerity can never outweigh error, nor can it in any way legitimize error and qualify one for heaven. Truth is not some mystical thing. It is not subjective. It is not deduced or recognized by a certain feeling. Feelings and certainty, tradition and a misinformed zeal can only lead one astray, for they only confirm prejudices and preferences. They are not the path to truth, but gateways to hell. These are not the proper means by which to judge truth and separate it from error. Truth is logical, and when it comes to God's truth, it is understood and recognized by God revealing it, and his mighty word confirming it. A biased or malfunctioning scale will not give you a correct reading. Only a proper scale functioning perfectly will correctly show what the truth is. If one could believe something for 1,000,000 years, it would still not make it truth. For if it was not true, if one could believe something for 1,000,000 years, it would still not make it truth, if it was not truth to begin with. If truth is subjective, able to be recognized by emotion or experiences, then how does one explain the fact that those who are having the same feelings and experiences concerning what they believe the truth to be, all believe in different and contrasting doctrines and diverse gods? How then could feelings ever be that which could be safely depended upon, quote, with full trust and confidence, end quote, as a discerner of truth? How could one ever properly distinguish truth from error with feelings and sincerity, if feelings, experiences, and sincerity lead one person to this God and another person to a different God? All sincerity proves is conviction of belief, and all conviction proves is a sincere belief in that which one is convinced. Proof of truth is what everyone should be striving for, instead of merely settling for believing something which makes them feel good. Simply believing in something is no evidence that it is true, but only that it is believed. The truth is absolute and unchangeable, and not subject to what a man believes it to be. Something does not become truth simply because we believe it is truth. Something may well be considered truth, and acted upon accordingly, but a man's conviction in and of itself is no proof that what he believes to be true is true. Conflicting beliefs and contradictory claims as to what the truth is should sound alarm bells loudly and clearly in one's life. Disagreement between believers as to what the truth is a sign all are deceived, or that some may have the truth whilst others have been deceived into believing that which is untrue. Sincerity of belief is no proof of truth. Conflicting beliefs is the sure sign that all that is believed cannot be truth. There cannot be genuine unity when there is no agreement as to what is true. Many, however, see no problem with joining hands with those who believe differently. They say, everyone is different. Everyone sees things differently, and so we must respect one another and what we believe. But since when did truth ever become something that was subject to what a man believed or did not believe it to be? Are we to understand that our differences are a sign that we are one? That though their beliefs conflict, all religious people have the truth? Are differences somehow the sign that all are believing the same God? If opposing beliefs are a sign that all are believing in the same God, Why does the Word of God consistently warn of false doctrines which present false gods? This "we're all okay and have the true God even though what we believe about him differs" attitude is sheer madness. The line of thinking that says our differences do not change the fact that all are believing the same God is something which is not even considered in any other area of life. Two people who have different and opposing answers to an equation are not said to both have the right answer, for their answers are different, and if different, then they are opposed. Such thinking puts man above truth. It makes truth subservient to man and whatever he believes it to be. However, since when has the truth ever found its starting point with what a man believes it to be? I've never understood how people who claim to have the truth can possibly and comfortably unite with those who disagree with them. Can two walk together except they be agreed? Amos 3:3. I mean, on what basis are we to respect one another? That we're all human? Or that we all believe something? That we are fellow believers not because we believe the same thing, but that we all believe something? If true unity exists among people simply because they have a belief, then what of those who believe in the same thing? Surely true unity can only be present among those who believe the same thing, rather than among those who simply believe something. One rightly believing that Jesus the Messiah is God, and another believing Buddha to be God, does not for a moment suggest grounds for unity of any kind, for such beliefs are in the strictest opposition and nullify the other. While there is a generalized unity among believers, whatever they believe which separates them from those... Whilst there is a generalized unity among believers, whatever they believe which separates them from those who do not believe, true unity can only exist among those believers who believe the same thing. For example, there is a general unity shared between all men who play football, for they are all football players. But there is a different kind of unity, a specific unity among players who play for the same team. This kind of unity is that which separates those who play for the Dallas Cowboys from those who play for the Denver Broncos, and those who believe the truth from those who labour under the misapprehension that what they believe is truth. How can there be unity over who God is and what his holy word says between people who vigorously disagree? How can a person who believes 2 + 2 = 4 possibly respect any other answer to this equation? Disagreement does not give anyone license to violence, be it physical or verbal, toward anyone who opposes them. However, I cannot respect any beliefs or the entertainment of doctrines which oppose the truth, and therefore could not possibly be truth, but only anti-truth. Anti-truth is not only opposed to truth, it is against truth and seeks to usurp the place of truth. Despite all this, many Protestant so-called Christians happily sit alongside Roman Catholics, Mormons, and others with whom they have doctrinal disagreement, neglecting their differences and seeking communion over what they do agree with. It's basically, we're all nice people, so no matter what we believe, the fact that we all believe something shows we are all bound for heaven. Such a worship of unity at the expense of truth is becoming more and more accepted in the last days. Man has become so blind to truth and its essential role in salvation that he sees very little need for it. Such people actually laugh at their differences. They make jokes about the most serious and gravest of matters: what a person believes. The world sees all this so-called unity as commendable and loving. But what is so commendable about putting anything above truth? What is so loving about leaving a person in their ignorance of the truth and not telling them what the truth is? Man has become so ridiculously sensitive to the feelings of others that truth is no longer important. But is this alleged sensitivity really an excuse for apathy? Is man's alleged sensitivity really a metaphor for indifference? It would appear that what the truth actually is to such politically correct people is not as important as one believing something to be truth. But what advantage can believing a lie provide? Unity at the cost of truth is not unity, but at best wishful thinking. Quote, "Unity without truth is nothing but an illusion. Let us," end quote. "Let us unite, for we are all believers," they cry, with simply no regard or concern as to what they are believing and who their doctrines are defining. Someone once wrote the lyrics, "God remains the same, forms of God have changed." End quote. The problem with this carnal thinking is that not only does God not change, he is in no way to any degree changeable. No aspect of God is changeable, nor is his infallible word subject to how a man interprets it. If God remains the same God forever, then his truth remains the same truth forever, and it is precisely that God, that truth, which must be believed. If heresy is heresy and heretics are heretics, then that is what they shall remain as long as they believe in that which is not the only true God's truth. God does not adapt or morph himself. He does not present himself to people as they would like him to be, or as they would prefer him to be, but simply and always as he can only be, himself. God is not a chameleon-like God. God is who he is, and he does not change. God says of himself, "I am that I am." Exodus 3:14. Quote, "This signifies the real being of God, his self-existence, and that he is the being of beings, as also it denotes his eternity and immutability, and his constancy and faithfulness in fulfilling his promises, for it includes all time, past, present, and to come. And the sense is, not only I am what I am at present, but I am what I have been, and I am what I shall be, and shall be what I am." End quote. God is immutable. It is only the views of carnal man that change. God remains the same forever. See Hebrews 13:8. And one either believes in him or one does not. God does not accept anyone who does not believe his truth, for if he did, believing the truth would not matter. If truth did not matter, it would lose all relevance, and would be transformed into a subjective free-for-all. Trusting in the true God, in the doctrines which specifically define and identify him, would not matter if truth did not matter. One would have no obligation to truth if truth did not matter. The only thing man would be obligated to believe would be that which one felt comfortable with, only with whatever each person privately called truth. Therefore, one would not need truth in order to know the true God. Consequently, who God is, his attributes and what he has done, would simply have no relevance to whether a person believed in the true God or not. The only thing that would matter would be believing, for it would surpass what is believed.